good to see you. It is Monday night. Happy Monday. I hope you have had a good week so far. It just started, but hopefully it was good. I had it wasn't a bad day. It was just one of those days where I just, my God, like my brain was not working right today for some reason. But anyway, it's over. It's fine. It's almost 10 o'clock at night. But somebody asked me if I would talk about something, and I decided I would just do this right quick while I kind of had it on my mind. So a subscriber said that they were thinking about going into working as a social worker, doing child protective services investigations, which I have actually done. Child protective services. It has different names in different places. In some places, it goes by DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services. There are different names for it. CPS, Child Protective Services. Here in North Carolina, it is CPS, Child Protective Services. So anyway, a subscriber was kind of thinking about, doing that, taking a job doing that, and wanted me to talk a little bit about it because I've mentioned before that I did do that for about a year when I was quite a bit younger than I am now. And I did. So I thought I would talk about it a little bit. Now, keep in mind, I did this job over 20 years ago. I am sure a whole lot of stuff has changed since I did it. Now, I'm not going to talk about any people or situations in particular. This is not referring to anyone in particular. You keep it all confidential. I would always respect that. I would never talk about anybody that I ever encountered in an investigation because it is confidential and I will never talk about it. But I wanted to tell you just a little bit about being a CPS investigator. My experience. Now, I can't speak for anybody else, obviously. And again, keep in mind, this was over 20 years ago. So I don't know what has changed since then. I'm sure a lot of stuff has changed. Some things never change. But so the first thing I would tell you, if you thought about doing that, first thing I would do is talk to somebody who has done it before in the area where you're going to be working, because being a CPS investigator in a city, like if you're in a county that has a big city in it, it's going to be very different from a rural area, like a sparsely populated area, more of a rural setting. It's just going to be different. The vibe's going to be different. The caseload is going to be different. It will just be different, and it just changes depending on where you work. Now, I did not work here. I'm not going to say where I worked. It was not here where I live now. I worked elsewhere. And it was in an area where I didn't know anyone, and that's the way I wanted it. I wanted to work in an area where I was not likely to encounter anybody I knew, and I never did. So that would have been, well, if I had encountered somebody I knew, I would probably have to talk to my supervisor, and then they would decide if I can continue or if the case needed to be transferred to somebody else. Because sometimes that did happen. You would have investigators who would get involved and say, actually, I went out and talked to the folks and I found out this is my cousin or whatever. So you cannot investigate people that you are related to or anything like that, because you could be biased. You can't be objective if it's like a family member or something like that. So you do have the duty to disclose to your supervisor that is the case, and then more than likely they would pull you out of there. But again, this was 20 years ago. I would imagine that's still true, though. You could always be accused later of not being objective if you said that you didn't find any problems or anything. That people could come back and say, well, of course not. You're related to them. So you would want to just get out of there. So, yeah, I would talk to somebody in the area where you're going to be working. I will tell you now, it's hard, and there is a lot of turnover in CPS, and I understand why. Having done it, I did it for about a year. I don't think I would have lasted more than 2 or 3 years. I think I would have gotten out. And a lot of people who do that will go on to transfer to another department in DSS. It's sort of under the umbrella of the Department of Social Services. So a lot of times they may start out in CPS because it's really easy. Not in every area, but it's pretty easy in a lot of places to get a job as a CPS investigator because they're constantly looking for people because of the high turnover rate. And I thought it would be a good job for me to utilize my psychology degree, and it was really the only time I ever did. Except this one time when the wife of an ex-fiance tried to kick my door in, and I had to calm her down, and she was threatening me with a box cutter. That has nothing to do with CPS, though. I don't know if I ever told you that story. If you want to hear that story, just let me know, but I'm not here to talk about that now. But I actually used some stuff that I learned while I was in school to deal with a combative, angry person who literally tried to kick my door in. That was scary. But so first thing, well, what I will also tell you about being a CPS investigator is that everybody hates you. Everybody's going to hate you. You will not make any friends being a CPS investigator. Nobody wants you knocking on their door. Nobody wants you calling them on the phone. They don't want to talk to you. Everybody hates you. The people you have to talk to don't like you. The people who report the stuff that you have to investigate, they don't like you because they're going to feel like you're not doing enough. You're not moving fast enough. Why haven't you arrested them? And, they seem to think you have this magic power. Like you can just go arrest people because somebody said a thing. And so now they have to, you have to go arrest them because I said a thing. Why do you need to investigate it? You have my word. It's true. They hate you. Everybody. Oh my God. You're not going to make any friends except with your coworkers because you can talk to one another and because they understand because they're going through the same thing. You are not, the scary thing about it is that you never know what kind of situation you're going into. And when I was doing it, you're not allowed to have any kind of personal protection of any sort. Although we all, pretty much had like at least some pepper spray or something. Because again, you never knew what you were going to run into. You had part of your training was learning how to deal with potentially violent situations and ways to get out of there alive. Of course, you can always call the police for backup if you need it. I had to do that once in my year there. I went to a home and the mom was asleep and on something, and her little child answered the door, and this was a little child, not old enough to go to school. And so then mom heard me talking to the little child and came out there and got physical with me and pushed me out of the house. I wasn't like in the house. I was just kind of like in the door, and she pushed me like off the deck, not off the deck, but like, like get away. So I had to first you call your supervisor, and then they have to get police involved. And we had to, long story short, the children had to go stay with a relative, but, and that ended up going to court. I actually had to testify in court, and her lawyer was an asshole. He was an asshole. Tried to make me sound like I was the problem because I had the audacity to go to her house while she was passed out, and, how dare you? And anyway, it can be dangerous. It can be, if you feel like it's a dangerous situation, use your training, go ahead and get out of there. Don't feel like you have to stay. Do not hesitate to call if you need the police to come help you. Do not hesitate to do that. Take good notes. That's one thing that a lot of CPS investigators didn't do. I tried to always take good notes when I talk to people. I want to make sure I get everything they say. I want to make sure I have a good record of what they have to say, because see, you will have this case, you will be given, and it was given to us on a rotational basis. And at that time, I think where I was working, there were 7 of us working in this area. And so it was on a rotation. So when your time came up, you would get the next case that came in. And they had an intake department where, so you call the CPS hotline or whatever they call it. You are going to have a person or multiple people who take those calls, and they are trained to screen the calls and to decide which ones to take and which ones not to take. And of course, they have people to consult if they're not sure whether they should take it or not. I can say from my experience, at least half of the ones that I investigated, it was somebody trying to cause trouble for somebody else. There was nothing there. It was a neighbor or an ex or even a relative or somebody who just did not like this person, who was just trying to cause them problems. And that's all it was. But you still have to investigate it. You still have to talk to all the parties involved. You have to get their sides. And you talk to the person who reported it. Sometimes things are reported anonymously and there's nobody to talk to on the other side. But most of the time, there was somebody who reported it who was very eager to talk to you. Oh, very eager. In the beginning, they're very eager to talk to you. But see, they seem to think that they can make this report and then by sundown, the person they reported is going to be in prison. Like, it doesn't work that way, but people seem to think it does for some reason. Yeah, I'm going to report them. They're going to get locked up. No, they're not. I mean, unless we get there and walk in on a crime scene, nobody's going to get locked up. You know, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. I know you want to cause people trouble and you want to mess with people, but you should not be using government agencies to do that. You know, the government messes with people just fine on their own. They don't need us to intervene to do it. No. So, oh God. And then, the thing that used to drive me crazy. Okay. So when I was a CPS investigator, I was not married. I had no children. You will get asked, I will just tell you now, you will get asked multiple times a week, well, have you got kids? Have you got any kids? Oh my God, I got that question. I wish I had a nickel for every person who asked me if I had kids. And I would say no. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, you would understand, but you don't have kids. Why did they even let you do this job if you don't even have any kids? Well, that wasn't one of the requirements. So I learned the best way to answer that question, because you will get it. The best way to answer that question is just to say, my family is not the topic of discussion right now. We are here to talk about your family, not mine. And I just leave it at that. And usually that would bring it to a halt. Like, that would stop it dead in its tracks and they would let it go. So I could be talking about my parents. I just say, my family is not at issue right now. We are here to talk about your family. Now let's get back to these questions. And I would just leave it at that. And usually that would kind of diffuse that little line of attack right there. The people that you have to talk to, the ones who are the subject of the investigation, will question you endlessly about who made the report. They will ask, which I get it. I mean, they just want to know, who called this in? Who? Ma'am, I'm not allowed to disclose that. You are not allowed to say who reported it. I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to disclose that. It was so-and-so, wasn't it? Like, if they guess, you have to tell them. You know, ma'am, I cannot tell you who did it. I bet it was. She's not saying, yeah, I bet it was. It was so-and-so. Yeah, it sounds like something she'd say. Oh, bitch. I don't swear in front of my children. It was, wouldn't it? Could you just like blink twice if I'm right? Because was it so-and-so? And they won't let it go. Like, they will just not drop it. They'll keep asking and asking. Well, was it so-and-so or was it such and such? I know it was one of them. Why don't you just tell me who it was? I'm going to go beat her ass. No, really, I'm not a violent person. I'm going to beat her damn ass. There was a lot of that. Like, I cannot tell you. So, I don't know the best way to handle that. I really don't. You could tell them it was anonymous. You could tell them you don't know who reported it. They're probably going to keep asking regardless of what you tell them, because they're not going to believe you until you give them a name, which you cannot do. You cannot tell them who reported it. In fact, I know they can't do it, but I wish they wouldn't even tell I wish it wasn't even on the form that you get who the reporter is if they give their name, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's reported by a school, like the kid. You see a lot of new cases come in the fall when kids go back to school. a whole rash of them will come in right at the end of school and right at the beginning of school. Like there will be stuff that a teacher or a guidance counselor was concerned about, and they're thinking, "Ooh, it's almost summer. I hate the thought of this going on. Maybe I should go ahead and report it." And then you get a whole rash of new stuff when the kids go back to school. Like they'll come in and maybe they'll say something to somebody, or maybe they have marks or bruises on them and they, can't explain where they came from, or they just flat out will tell somebody, "Oh yeah, my mom did that," or whatever. And so you just prepare yourself, and when school starts, you're probably going to have a lot more stuff coming in. Over the summer, it actually gets kind of quiet. You don't have as much over the summer. But man, when school starts, holy cow. And right when school lets out, it's a whole big rush of them right there. Your caseload will vary considerably depending on where you are and how big of a population you're dealing with and how many other investigators you have working with you. You could have anywhere from 20 to, I remember this one, and different investigators are certified and qualified to do different types of investigations. Now, there are different types. There's abuse, neglect, dependency, and SA. And I can't say like the SA. And you have to be very qualified to do those. And a lot of CPS investigators are not. I had just started that training when I ended up joining the cult and moving away. So I did not finish that. And because of the nature of some of the stuff going on at the church and the reason the bishop and founding pastor was in prison, I was told not to, we don't want you to lie about what your previous job was, but just don't volunteer to anyone in the church that you were a CPS investigator, because they're not very popular around here. After what they did to the pastor, well, I'm glad they did, because he actually needed to go to prison. I mean, I didn't know that at the time. I found out later all that shit was true. But that has nothing to do with this. I'm glad he died in prison. He was a disgusting man for what he did. But anyway, mostly what I did was dependency and neglect. And those are two different things. Dependency is where you have a kid, like one of the cases I had to investigate was a kid. He was in high school and he went to his guidance counselor and said, "I can't go home today." And the guidance counselor said, "Why not?" "Well, my dad told me not to come home. He told me I need to find somewhere to stay." And his mom was out of the picture. So I had to go talk to him at the school. And sometimes cases will come up where you have to go right away. You can't wait a day or two. Like my supervisor called me. We had our little cell phones, our little brick cell phones. This was back before they were much smaller. And she called me. I was actually on my way to another person's house. And she said, "Yeah, I need you to go to the high school and talk to this kid because he's saying he can't go home because his dad told him not to come home." So long story short, I had to go talk to him, and we worked it out with the dad, and he went home. But I had to follow up with them over the course of several weeks just to make sure everything was okay. And, are y'all good? Do you need anything? And we work with families to try to get them services and things to help with whatever the problem may be. If there is an issue going on, we try to help them deal with the issue. Basically, in training, what I learned was we're trying to work ourselves out of a job. It's never going to happen, but we're trying to get people to the point that our job is not necessary. It's never going to happen, but it would be nice if CPS was never needed again. So dependency is where you have a case where a kid has nowhere to go, and that happens more than you would think. Even in a rural area, you end up with situations where you have a kid under 18 that just has nowhere to go and they need help. So we help them out and try to work with the family and, help them deal with the problem and have a safe place for them to be. So that's dependency. Neglect is where you have a kid who is not being fed, clothed, housed properly. The reporter feels that they're not, And if the intake people decide it's sufficient for an investigation, like if the person says, well, they only have an iPhone 10, they're being neglected. No, they're not going to take that, obviously. But, you know, if somebody calls in and said, hey, you know, this kid has no food to eat, there's, you know, the house is full of animals and feces. I mean, we're going to go check that out. But we try to work, again, we are not, I will say when I did it, and again, this was over 20 years ago, I was not chomping at the bit to pull children away from their family. And that's what a lot of people was scared. They were scared of that. Like, you can't take my child. Like, I'm not here to take your child. I don't want to do that. None of us wants to do that. Because at the time, our foster care system was full anyway of children that just had nowhere to go. Like, we would have nowhere to put them anyway. I mean, we would make arrangements if we had to, but we are not, that is not our goal. We want to keep families together, and we want to do what we can to help keep your family together. And if you can just get that across to the parent, it can relieve a lot of their stress if they, you know, if they will listen. Sometimes they're just hysterical, and you're going to spend a big chunk of the visit just trying to get them to listen to you. Different people react different ways when they find out who you are and why you're there. Some of them cry, they get upset, they get scared. Some of them get angry, they'll start yelling and screaming at you. They'll tell you to get out of the house. But you know, I am mandated by law to talk to you. I need to talk to you, the other adults here. I need to talk to not just the child who may be the subject of this investigation. I need to talk to the other children in the house, and I need to talk to them in private. Now, I know you don't, if they don't like that, you may have to get the police involved. Now, I only had to do it that one time, fortunately. But okay, you're going to have to use all of your people skills, because every situation you walk into is going to be different. But you have your marching orders. You have your orders. Here's what you have to do. You have to go talk to these people. You have to talk to the child in private. Now, a lot of that I would do at school. You could go to the school, and the guidance counselor would put you, you know, in a room with the child so you could talk to them. And usually we would try to talk to the child first at school. If it was during school. In the summer, it's a little trickier. You don't really have that option unless they're in some daycare somewhere. You might be able to do it there. And it's not because we're trying to be sneaky. It's because we want the child to feel that they can talk to us and not be scared. And some of them were anyway. You know, I don't, you know, you could just tell, like, they're scared to tell you anything because, like, oh, what if mom finds out? What if dad finds out? You know, what if grandma finds out? Because some of them live with their grandparents and there were issues, and I'm so scared. So you have to use all your people skills. You have to be compassionate. You have to be patient. You have to listen, because these poor little kids, some of them are just terrified to tell you anything because they're so scared you're going to go tell whoever they're talking about. They're so scared you're going to go tell them, and they're scared of what's going to happen. And honestly, I worried about that a lot. There was this one case in particular, and I had nothing to base it on. It was just this strong feeling I kept getting every time I went to see this family, that I was so scared that the parent would retaliate against the child because of what the child told us about what happened. And I don't think they were making it up. I think they were being genuine about it. And every time I went, I just had this feeling like I talked to my supervisor about it. I said, you know, and your supervisor's you're going to have a lot to say to them, because when you get ready to close a case, you have to discuss it with them. What was it called? There was a term for it. Oh my God. You conference it. I think it was conference. You conference a case. And you will go over all the details when you're kind of wrapping it up, and you give everything to your supervisor, and your supervisor will decide whether to close it or continue it. And I told my supervisor, I said, every time I go to this house, I get this strong strong feeling. I've never forgotten it. I still think about it sometimes. Every time I go over there, I get this feeling that something is very wrong. And I don't have anything to base it on. It is just this gut feeling every time I go over there. And she said, well, unfortunately, we can't base any decisions on your feelings, which that's a good thing because you shouldn't be basing it on your feelings. But I didn't feel right about it. But everything appeared to be wrapped up, done, dealt with, resolved. I said, I just feel like there's something else going on that we're missing. But I don't have any proof of anything. It's just a feeling. She said, well, we cannot base decisions on feelings. So we closed it out, and I still, that was over 20 years ago, I still think about that kid. I still wonder if I was right, and I hope to hell I wasn't. But it's a hard job. The abuse cases are hard. I was not really into that. There were some CPS workers that did the abuse cases. They typically took those when they came around. I handled more dependency and neglect. I did do a couple of abuse cases. Actually, one of the last ones I did before I moved away was an abuse case, and it stuck with me. I'm not going to tell you about it. It involved a very, very young child, and I had to go visit them in the hospital, in the ICU. And they could not talk, and because of what happened. And I never forgot that. I will tell you now, from having done that job, my opinion, some people don't need to ever be around children. They don't need to have a damn thing to do with children. Some people do not need to be parents. They do not need to have anything to do with children. I think there are just evil people. There are evil ass people out there that do things to kids that it's just like the damn devil. I don't know any other way to describe it. So you are going to see things, you are going to hear things that are going to make your blood boil. You have to stay calm, especially when you're talking to the child. Keep your calm. Stay calm. When you get out to the car and you're away from them, you can cry, you can scream, you can do whatever you need to do. Do not do it in front of the child. Try to stay calm, because if you get upset, it's going to make them upset and it's going to scare them. That's the last thing they need to see. God, you will lose all faith in humanity. I swear to God. Now, most of the cases you investigate are going to be nothing. It's going to be obvious pretty much from the start. Somebody has got it in for this person. They're just trying to cause them problems. There is nothing going on here. Somebody is just trying to cause trouble. That's all it is. But you still have to investigate it. You still have to talk to everybody, gather all your information, make your notes, fill out your forms. You still have to do all that. But it's like, man, it is such a waste of time. It is a waste of time. It is a waste of resources. But people do it, and I'm sure they still do. I'm sure they still do. That is a big chunk of what you will do, is just deal with just bullshit reports. But you still have to investigate, because you don't know until you go what's going on, until you really investigate it. But yeah, just try to stay objective. Try not to and you'll learn all this in training, because you have extensive training to do this job. Don't let your feelings and your opinions and your preconceived notions get in the way. I mean, we are human. It's impossible to be completely objective, but try to be as objective as you can be, no matter who you're talking to, no matter what the situation is. Just try to stay calm, and be objective as possible. And understand that it is a very stressful job. It doesn't pay very well. The benefits are not the best. Well, I can't speak for every place, but I honestly, the whole system, just from what I know about it. Now, I will tell you, full disclosure, I had a very contentious divorce and post-divorce in my own life, where CPS was a constant in my life. So I've been on the receiving end of CPS reports as well. So I know what it's like to be on both sides of it. I have had to deal with both ends of that. And thank God that's all over. But I endured 13 years of that. In and out of court, in it just constant drama, 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 and I do not miss it. I do not miss it, and I'm so glad it's over. It stresses the kids out, it stresses you out, it stresses everybody out, just so somebody can get their jollies by calling in a false report. It's such bullshit, and I wish there was a way, there was some kind of punishment for people who do that, but there's not. But the whole CPS system is, it's pretty, I don't want to say it's broken. Well, in a lot of places it is broken. But again, this is one of those situations where I will say it needs a major overhaul, but I wouldn't have the first clue of what to do about it. I don't know any better way to do it. I really don't. It's like the government's version of the Jerry Springer show. If you like excitement, be a CPS investigator. You will have more excitement than you can handle. Holy hell. It is something. There is a lot of corruption in it. And I'm not saying everywhere, but in some areas there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of just BS that goes on, and I don't know how you fix it. I don't know. It's kind of like the education system. There's so much that could be fixed and improved. I wouldn't even know where to start. It's like you just have to tear the whole thing down and start over. But if you were to start over, I don't know where I would start over. It's so overwhelming. But I'm glad we have something for children. Many years ago, there was no CPS. It actually started, and I can't remember when it was, and it's been over 20 years since I learned this, but it started out, I want to say it was in the 20th century. I want to say it was the early 1900s. Shit, I can't remember. I should have looked it up, but I didn't think about it before I sat down here. There was a woman who saw this little girl, and she was being neglected and abused and mistreated. And she called the police, and they were like, we don't get involved in family stuff, She ended up having to call the dog pound, like the dog catcher or animal services or something, like, can you help with this kid? And like animal services or something got involved in it. And out of that, people started to say, we need some way to help children in need, some kind of something. I mean, it's bad if you have to call the frickin' dog catcher to help with this poor kid. I mean, God, I'll have to look it up. I can't remember now, and I'm probably butchering the hell out of it, but it's been a while. But I'm glad we have something. It's not perfect. I mean, a lot of times you think back to stuff, you think about like that one case, and you wonder if you missed something. Like, I asked all the questions, I went over the report, and we discussed everything at length, and I talked to the kid, and I talked to this person, and I talked to that person. It just kind of nags you sometimes. They're like, did I miss something? Maybe if I had asked this question a different way, I would have gotten an answer. I don't know. You just always have this feeling like, I just wonder if I missed something. And the case is closed now and we're out, but I don't know. I mean, no, I didn't have kids yet, but you really develop compassion for these kids, especially the ones, the abuse. God, you hear about what these kids go through. And it just, your heart breaks for these kids. I mean, damn. And you just want to help them. And sometimes you just can't. We can't base decisions on your feelings. I'm sorry if you feel like there's something going on, but if you have no evidence, we can't do anything. And you want to do what you can for them. And sometimes you just can't. And it sucks. And it will haunt you. It will stay with you. And you will remember it. Because like I say, it was over 20 years ago, and I still remember some of those kids and their situations, and I wonder, and I hope they turned out okay. I hope they turned out all right. I hope things were okay for them. And for some parents, a CPS report is like a slap of reality in the face. It's like an eye opener, like, oh my God, and they're eager to accept the services. Like, we'll help them get counseling, we'll help them, with whatever we can to help with whatever the issue is, and they're eager to do it, and they want to do it. Like, I want to be a better parent to my child. I want to do the right thing. I want to make sure my kid is okay. Can you help me? Oh, absolutely. We love that, because a lot of parents are very stubborn, and they don't want to talk. They don't want any help. They don't want anything from anybody, and they refuse to change. They refuse to do anything differently, and it is just an uphill battle dealing with some parents. But it's a tough job. It's a tough job. Would I want to do it now? I'm too old. Oh my God, I'm too old. I couldn't. I don't think I could. I just, the older I get, the harder it is for me to bite my tongue. And there will be times you will want to say something and you can't. You can't. And the older I get, the harder it is for me to be quiet. But no, I don't think I could do it. And I know when I did it, you have to be on call occasionally, which back then, that meant you had a pager, and at night, and for 2 weeks at a time, you would have that pager every night, every weekend, so that if like 911 or somebody got a call and a child was involved, and it was a possible CPS-ish thing, you would have to go. And when I did my own call, I only had to do one. But then I left. So they don't put you on call right away. You have to work there for, I worked there for probably 8 months before I was put on call. So that you have some experience going into it. And I did have to go to an emergency room at like 3 a.m. one night. There was, I don't want to give details, something about a kid. It actually turned out to be okay, but we did open a case on that. But I don't think, it was unsubstantiated ultimately, I think. And I don't think they use those terms anymore. We would either say the case was substantiated, like, yes, we did find dependency or abuse or neglect. And sometimes you would find more than one of those things, or SA. And for that, you would have, and I did not do this, but they would have to take them for a medical examination for that. And there's a lot of specialized training that goes into doing that work, and they don't let just anybody do it. And so, I didn't do that. Although I did accompany one social worker taking a child for their examination, because they just felt that having somebody else there would, be good, just to kind of talk to the child and, keep them, try to make it it's not fun, but I mean, and you're not in the room when the examination is going on, but while we were waiting, just to kind of hang out with them and, just talk to them and, just try to make them as comfortable as possible. And but I was not involved in the investigation. I just kind of accompanied them on that one thing. No, I couldn't do it. And like I say, even if I had stayed with that job, I don't think I would have lasted more than 2 or 3 years total. I just don't think I had it in me to do it. Now, there were a couple of workers who had been doing it. One of them had been there for 8 years, and she was like an old timer. Like, she was a long timer. That's a long time to last in that job. I don't think I could do it. But I don't know. She had been assaulted. She ended up having to go to the hospital to get stitches one time. She had a gun pointed in her face one time. Like, no. I couldn't do it, man. But I'm glad somebody does it. I know not every CPS worker is perfect. They're not. Just like anybody working anywhere, you're going to have people who are corrupt. You're going to have people who are biased and may just have it in for somebody. I don't know. You can have that in any job. That's not a good job to be that way in. But I always try to be just as objective as possible. Like, leave all of your whatever at home. You are just talking to people and you need to listen to them, just the facts, write everything down. That's your job. It is not your job to insert your own preconceived notions into this thing. And that can be hard to do. I mean, harder than you may think. You will learn that. Sometimes it's hard to stick to the facts, but you need to do that as much as possible. So, yeah, yeah, everybody will hate you. They will constantly ask you if you have kids or not. They will ask you personal questions. They will call you names. They will cuss you out. I have been cussed out, screamed at, which is why YouTube is funny. Like, you're not going to call me anything I haven't already been called to my face. So it's okay. You can insult me the way I look. You can insult anything about me you want. I've heard it all. It's okay. Because again, everybody reacts differently when they find out who you are and why you are at their house. So, yeah. Most people are okay, though. I will say most people are okay. They're a little shocked, usually, like, what? You know, most people are not terrible. But every now and then you get a spicy one, and those are the ones you got to look out for. You'll learn about all that in your training, though, if you do decide to go ahead with the job. But that's about all I know to say about it. Definitely a high stress job. You have to be ready to turn on a dime and be ready for anything. I think it's definitely a better job for a younger person. I'm 50, like I just know. Oh, the thought of doing that now just makes me tired. I couldn't do it. But somebody's got to do it, and I'm glad they do. I mean, you know, you can't save every kid, but if you could save just one from a bad situation, I think it's worth it. And, you know, I wish you all the best to the person who asked for this video. I wish you all the best if you do decide to go ahead with it. I'm not trying to talk you out of it. I'm just telling you what you might expect to deal with if you do it, just from my experience. And again, I'm just one person. I'm just a goober on the internet. But I would definitely talk to some other people who are currently working there, and you can do that. I mean, you can just find out, like, you can just tell the person who interviews you, can I just speak to some of the other investigators and just, you know, hear a little bit from them what it's like. They may go, oh God, don't do that. No. Now, they would let you do that. So I would recommend it just to get a feel for what you're going into, because again, every area is different depending on where you are, city, country, wherever, it's going to be different. So, but I wish you all the best, and thank you for your question, and thank y'all all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.